Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming for the session. We know it's the second last day and late in the afternoon, or getting late in the afternoon, so we'll try and keep it as interesting as possible. I'm Barzan Patel. I'm the director for the go-to-market strategy at StorSimple, and I've got Jay Desai with me, who's our worldwide technical solutions professional, TSP, as we call them. As you may know, StorSimple was an acquisition by Microsoft late last year. We both actually were early members of the StorSimple team, so I've really kind of been there from the start, seen the company grow. And prior to this role, which I kind of have, I was the architect and the lead developer for the solution, the application side of it, and Jay was kind of doing testing and then kind of a whole bunch of other stuff. I've lost track of what he's done. So as far as the session goes, we want to kind of keep it as interactive and interesting as possible. If you've got a quick question, feel free to raise your hand. We'll try and kind of identify you with the spotlight in our eyes, and we can take quick questions. If it's kind of a lengthier discussion, we can table it to the end. But just keep it interactive. We're kind of doing this for you guys, yeah. So as far as the objectives go today, 4 very simple objectives. We want to kind of make sure you understand kind of holistically storage and the storage challenges in the industry today. I'm sure some of you all kind of live and breathe them on a daily basis, but we'll kind of just cover them off in a couple of slides. We'll, of course, kind of the bulk of the presentation is going to be focused on the StorSimple solution. We've targeted at kind of a reasonable level of depth where you kind of get the big picture, as well as kind of we'll get into a little bit of the weeds as well. It's called technology. And then Jay will do the demo. He's gonna very compelling 15-20 minute demo. He's gonna walk us through the entire StorSimple configuration and use case, and then we'll kind of see kind of when it makes sense to adopt the solution and when you should kind of reconsider. So before we get started, just kind of a show of hands. How many of y'all are IT focused and IT storage focused? Oh, wow, bulk of it. So cool. So you guys will kind of enjoy the session. Okay, so let's get started, right? So a lot of people talk about storage, and the first thought which comes to mind, storage, is this little kind of RAID array or something where I kind of put my data. Right? Of course, perfect definition of storage. But as IT admins, as CIOs, as decision makers, you guys and the people who kind of have to make these hard decisions know that it's a lot more than that. Storage, the primary data storage, which we all kind of really just conventionally call storage, is just a portion of that. As that data grows, you need kind of some way to archive off that old data. That needs to be often needs to be considered and factored in your initial deployment of and selection of storage. There's the backup. You need to kind of protect your data. There's disk-based backup for kind of real-time, near real-time kind of restores. You also kind of need tape-based backup, off-site backup, right? As well as possibly some replicated storage or a DR solution. So really in the storage world, when we kind of talk about storage, it's all these things which need to be considered. It's not just the primary. Just the primary kind of leaves you kind of extremely exposed, and you need to kind of factor in everything. Now, as you can see, meaning the point out here is when you kind of consider all these different aspects of storage and different components which need to come together, it becomes a complex task to select the components, to kind of configure them, maintain them at a reasonable price point, right? What are some of the challenges today, right? Equipment sprawl. You have one box, often have one solution or a server doing each of these tasks, right? There's a different server which is kind of doing backup onto another storage array. There's something else for replication. There's a tape library and FedEx coming to your office every week or every day to kind of pick up the tapes. It's kind of a lot of moving parts and pretty complex. So we've got equipment sprawl, the data footprint is growing, real estate, power, cooling is kind of becoming a problem, just becoming a complex management problem all around. And this is the state of storage today, what we kind of term, and I'll kind of refer to this, and so will Jen in the rest of this talk, as traditional storage. This is how people are doing storage today, and that's kind of what we've all kind of grown up with and learned to love. And now there's a better way. And the better way is what we call hybrid cloud storage. And really kind of the problems don't go away, meaning all the tasks which you have to execute don't go away. You still kind of need your primary storage. You still need to back it up. You need some offsite backup, DR protection. All that still remains. So that lower portion of that slide you see, that's intact. That's what you saw on the previous slide. But rather than have individual solutions and components to take care of all these tasks, we offer what we call hybrid cloud storage, which is the StorSimple appliance, which you see out here in front of you. It's a 2U rack-mountable appliance, and of course, the Azure backend storage. That meld together is what comprises hybrid cloud storage. And in the rest of the presentation, I'll show you how we kind of address all these storage needs through one integrated solution. So let's move on. So this is by far the most important slide of the presentation, right? You understand this, and you'll understand everything about StorSimple and the StorSimple solution. So the value prop at the 9,000-foot level, the value prop is the StorSimple solution, right? What we call hybrid cloud storage, helps you connect existing Windows servers and applications running on the Windows servers to Azure storage in less than 10 minutes without requiring any change to your application or the application's configuration. So basically what I'm saying is just seamless. Without changing anything on your application side, you can adopt Azure storage, and I'll show you how, right? In fact, you can kind of see it on this very slide. On the very top, you have your application servers, right? And those stay static. We don't change anything on those application servers. Those application servers connect to the StorSimple appliance over iSCSI. Those are the two yellow lines you see out there, and that's the appliance. Now, this appliance has two tiers of storage built into it. There's a SSD tier and a SAS tier, right? Think of those as local storage, which are used to hold the hot data. The hot working set data is held on these two tiers. There's also a third tier, which is the Azure, which is the cloud, right? Azure, Windows Azure storage, as shown at the bottom of that slide. And that protocol is HTTP REST, right? So pretty simple, three-tier tiering storage. The real kind of the secret sauce, the core of the guts of our kind of IP is embedded in the way we kind of tier this data. So just, I know you guys are pretty technical. So the way it works is data being written over iSCSI is broken up into blocks. These blocks then get deduplicated, compressed. They get encrypted using an AES 256-bit cipher before they get piped out to the cloud. So all that happens automagically within the appliance. And the backend Azure connectivity and kind of hookup is kind of completely seamless to you guys as data admins or kind of application admins. You do not need to kind of know. You don't know what happens. That's stuff we take care of seamlessly under the covers. So if you're kind of looking, if you're looking to kind of adopt Azure in a kind of a very low-risk way, this is the solution for you, right? We've got kind of more than 250 customers right now, and that's kind of one message we kind of hear from them just unanimously. It's kind of an easy. We've always wanted to adapt the Azure cloud, but we kind of didn't want to kind of change our applications. We didn't want kind of deep invasive surgery on our kind of deployments, and this has kind of given us an easy way to kind of adopt it. Yeah. So fast on-ramp to the cloud, number one benefit. As I kind of showed you on the previous slide, right? Seamlessly integrated and kind of built-in backup, restore, DR capabilities, which is very important when you kind of when you're kind of moving data to the cloud. You want to kind of make sure that you can back it up and you still have control over that data, full control over that data. And of course, the biggest value prop and the kind of most compelling feature is the ROI. So we kind of boast of a 60 to 80% savings on ROI compared to traditional storage. And we've got, Jay will kind of show you a slide which kind of compares the two side by side here. Okay, so this is all kind of great, right? So I'm sure some of you at least are thinking, so what's the big deal, right? Azure storage has been around for like 3 years now. It's kind of a fully public HTTP REST API. I can just adopt it. That's simple, right? Not really. It's not that easy. And the reason it's kind of not easy is kind of explained in this slide. So here's what. Look at that slide. The diagram shows application servers and the Azure cloud, right? And you know the protocol out there which you need to adopt is HTTP REST. Now, if you were to take an application and directly hook it up to use the Azure cloud, it wouldn't work. And it wouldn't work for 3 main reasons. The first is integration. Well, who wants to take an existing stable application and rewrite their data access layer to kind of talk to a cloud? That's kind of the worst place to make a change, right? The data access layer, if it's kind of well-baked, no one wants to touch that layer, leave alone kind of bet their job on it and change it around to save a few $100 or $1,000. So no one kind of wants to take that risk. The second is, say, magically, if you figure out a way to kind of solve that problem and you were kind of bold enough to take that risk, the very next problem you'd run into is performance, right? Applications, stable applications today, the traditional applications, they expect I/O response times in milliseconds, tens of milliseconds. The cloud is kind of 50, 100 millisecond plus. Plus, it's unreliable. As in, sometimes it can take 100 milliseconds, sometimes it can take 300 milliseconds, and that's just the nature of the WAN and the cloud. You do not want to run into that and be forced to expose that out as a user experience problem, right? Eventually, you'll have to kind of, all the delays you have to kind of surface up, and they basically spoil the user experience. So that's the next problem. Performance won't kind of work out. Plus, if you were to really kind of go over the WAN for every bit and every byte, it would be cost prohibitive. WAN is a very expensive resource. It's kind of come down drastically, I would say, in the last 5 years in the US, but if you kind of leave continental US, you'll kind of see that WAN is pretty expensive and pretty limited in its availability as far as just a scarce resource in other geos. Yeah. And lastly, security. If you're going straight to the cloud, that means you're kind of doing clear text data up to Azure and to the cloud and back, and no one is comfortable with that. From all our customer conversations, especially the earlier ones, now that kind of point comes up less, the number one concern around cloud adoption is security. I've always kind of had this data in my backyard, and now you're telling me to kind of put it in some place which may not even be in this country, and people just cannot. They understand AES 256 and kind of all this stuff, but they don't really kind of buy into all of it until you kind of show them a kind of the holistic solution, and we'll see that in this session as well. Security is a big concern. So that's the solution. Now let's kind of just change gears a little bit and see kind of the state of the data and the need of the industry today. So according to IDC, data today is growing 50 to 60% annually, and this is unstructured data, right? It's just tearing through the roof on that exponential curve you see up there, right? If you kind of peel the onion on that data growth, you quickly find and realize that the data, while the data is growing exponentially, the working set data, the data customers really are using on a day-to-day basis or maybe week-to-week basis, is just a sliver of that overall growth. That overall growth is coming from data which is not being used, and people don't want to kind of delete it because maybe some employee left the business, or there's some compliance requirement, or that's just the nature of the business. A lot of kind of the insurance agencies, healthcares, they want to keep all their data around forever, right? That's where all this exponential growth is coming from. Now, what the StorSimple solution and the StorSimple appliance does is it intelligently separates this data out through kind of the block and the block ranking and tiering, and we keep that hot working set data local on the appliance, on the SSD and the SAS tiers of this appliance, and we tier out all the cold data to the Azure cloud. Pretty simple concept. That's what the solution works with, right? And effectively what we've done is we've kind of given the performance and feature set which customers expect from traditional storage through this appliance and married that to the cloud economics, and kind of in that coupling, we've kind of offered them the phenomenal ROI cost savings. Now, as you can imagine, if this is how I'm kind of explaining it, and this is how the appliance and the solution works, it's not a solution for all data types, right? You take so let's kind of start with the applications we do focus on, which is file shares, right? Great example, tons and tons of data, very little which customers really the customers' users actually access. Like you access I was accessing this PowerPoint yesterday and today. That's pretty much all I was accessing. I've kind of got another 2 gig of data on my public share, which I don't care about, at least not in the last 2 days. Stuff like that. It could be rotating data, as in, I'm not going to touch this presentation now till TechEd Europe and maybe start working on something else. So the working set can be changing and evolving over time, but the fact of the matter is the working set for a file share is pretty small compared to the overall amount of data. SharePoint is another great use case. We actually kind of have a plugin called the StorSimple SharePoint Adapter, through which we separate out kind of the blobs from the database from all of you guys who are familiar with SharePoint, and we really kind of make that storage of the database, the relational content, and the blob store very efficient. And you kind of really need it if you kind of really factor in the recycle bin and all the versions you can kind of create with SharePoint, and how easy it is to do that. The users love that feature, but it's a nightmare for the data admins, and kind of a solution like this really kind of helps out there. Archives is another great candidate, as well as kind of virtual machines. Virtual machines is kind of particularly interesting for me because it's a problem where there aren't as many files, and just looking at the file count, you kind of often scratch your head and say, why do I have such a problem with this workload? It's because each of those files are just ginormous, right? So while file shares is a bazillion small files, VMs is a few hundred or kind of maybe even less, really large files. And that's kind of become a big problem for a lot of customers. We've got some really good customer references and case studies who are using our solution just for VMs. Okay, so you guys will like this animation, yeah? So this is how the StorSimple appliance works, right? I've already kind of loosely explained this to you. So think of it as 4 tiers, and the 4 tiers being, the first 2 being SSD, right? I said there was an SSD tier. The first SSD tier is the linear tier. When data kind of gets written to the appliance over iSCSI, we kind of break it up in these blocks, 64K blocks, and we just kind of immediately ingest them onto the appliance. We don't kind of get fancy and start doing any inline operations on them because we do not want to slow the response time back to the application. So we're like, just give it to us, we'll kind of store it, we immediately acknowledge the I/O coming in. Now, that kind of continues. Now, as you can imagine, the SSD, in the grand scheme of things, is a pretty thin layer. Over time, as more and more data gets written to the linear tier, we will deduplicate that data, and we'll push it down to what we call the SSD dedupe tier, right? And we've got kind of threads, which variable number of threads, which kind of spin up to get this operation going. And as you can see, a couple of the blocks got deduplicated. Now, as additional data gets written out, the same operation occurs again, and data gets pushed out from the SSD dedupe tier to the SAS tier. And while it's getting pushed down to that lower layer, we also compress the data. So effectively, what we're going to have done at to this point is we've just increased the packing density of the data set, And we want to do that, right? We want to kind of keep as much data as possible local to this appliance. We have kind of limited space out here, and we want to kind of maximize that packing density. That's the SSD and the SAST here. And of course, over time, more and more data will get written to the appliance, and some of it will have to get tiered out to the cloud. And that's when we do that AES 256 encryption and push it out to the cloud. Right? Make sense? Question? 64K. Yeah. So data's got pushed out, right? This is all great, meaning everything kind of seems to be working. Now, say 6 months pass, and someone realizes, or kind of one of you guys send me mail and asked for this presentation, and the presentation's already got tiered out from my file share to the cloud. I, as a user, through my Windows laptop, will make a request for that file. The request will go over iSCSI. It will hit the appliance. The appliance will say, yes, person had written this file out, right? 6 months back. These are the, whatever, 10 or 15 or 30 blocks which correspond to this file. And guess what? He's not accessed them for so long. They're all in the cloud. So when that happens, the request goes down, and I don't know whether you kind of saw that, but E block, say E was the file, which the block which my presentation corresponded to, that would get pulled back seamlessly to me as the user back into the dedupe tier and served up over iSCSI for my request. That request may take a few extra milliseconds. Undoubtedly, that's going to happen, right, if you're going to go into the cloud. But guess what? If I've not touched something for 6 months, a few extra milliseconds or even like a few seconds, who cares, really? So that's how it works. Any questions? This is the core kind of tiering operation of the solution. Yeah. Great question, yeah. So question was, is the tiering just based on time, or is it also kind of also access? So we use several heuristics to determine which is a good candidate block to push down to lower tiers. So of course, last access time was kind of one of the kind of the key criteria we use. We also use reference counting. So reference counting is, say a block has been deduplicated, right? That deduplicated block, which is kind of a part of many other files, obviously has higher probability of being accessed again, right? So we basically give that a kind of a higher priority. So all else being equal, we would kind of say, let's hold this block because it's been referenced from 5 places. There's a higher likelihood it's going to be accessed. Exactly. Yeah. It's all relative. So we don't kind of just, we have these kind of high water, low water marks, and we kind of base our algorithms and operations based on kind of where we are in between those high water and low water marks. We don't just kind of needlessly and senselessly start pushing stuff around. Pushing stuff to Azure and kind of bringing it back has real dollars associated with it, so we're kind of very sensitive to that. Yeah. Sorry, there was a question.
When you bring data back from Azure, does it always go to the SSD tier?
Yes.
Or does it never go to the SAST tier?
No, we just directly put it to the SSD tier. The reasoning being that, well, you accessed it, and you're going to most likely access it again. Yeah. Okay, so moving on. So, sorry, question.
Yeah, do you do new blocks against already cloud?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
You mentioned that you do RBS uploading from SharePoint?
Yes.
So do you need third-party middleware to do that, or is that what?
So that's a great question. So we do have what we call the StorSimple SharePoint adapter, which is that middleware you're talking about. That's part of the solution. So when you buy StorSimple, when you buy the hybrid cloud storage solution, and you intend to use it in a SharePoint use case, we'll kind of provide that to you at no additional cost. That's a pretty, if you know the lay of the land, that's a pretty expensive component. Yeah. We view that as kind of a means to an end. We do need that kind of separation to optimize the layout as it gets stored on Azure. And if you want additional information on that, you can kind of contact me. I'll point you to that. Yeah. Question?
Yeah, actually 2 questions. First, do you guys have any integration plans with PPM? Obviously, this is a very elegant solution.
Yeah.
long-term retention, obviously we can't afford this with long-term retention, and this is the hybrid model that I think most IT organizations are looking for. Second question is, if you break your working set or you exceed it through your own growth, can I scale that with a new device or does it work both ways?
Great, both great questions. So the first question, you know I was going to say yes, right? Yeah, we're kind of now Microsoft. So undoubtedly, we're working on the DPM integration. We kind of aren't ready to kind of talk about kind of roadmap yet, but absolutely, that's been a common ask, yeah. And the second question was, say you exceed the local capacity, what can I do about it, right? So what we would kind of, so the first thing I would kind of say is you shouldn't exceed your local capacity, right? That's just really bad. That means you kind of didn't do due diligence upfront in the sizing, right? No, I understand that. So what we would kind of recommend at that point is, so this is an appliance, right? This is kind of like your DVR from Comcast with 100 gig of storage. When you want to kind of get a 300 gig storage DVR, you have to kind of mail that appliance back and get the other appliance with 300 gig hard drive, even though we all know kind of there's just a hard drive which is different. Think of this StorSimple appliance the same way. So it's not user upgradable in the field. So, good math, yeah, something like that. No, let me finish my answer. So at that point, what you kind of have to do is if you kind of grow, if you're growing your data, if your data is growing and you want to kind of scale it out, kind of have more local capacity, and let's pick a use case. Like let's pick file shares. What I would kind of recommend, or what the recommended approach out there is, you take a few of your file shares, right? A few of your X drive, Y drive, whatever, and kind of migrate them over to the StorSimple appliance. That's kind of in an extreme case. That's when you realize that there was a problem after it was too late. You were thrashing the cache. What is a better approach is you kind of know how you're scaling, right? You know what you bought the solution for. At some point, you'll kind of take stock of the situation and say, hey, this is not working out for me. I'm kind of close to the capacity. I'm reaching capacity. At that point, what we recommend is kind of get another StorSimple appliance and kind of all the new data which is coming out, structure it such that it kind of falls out there. Yeah, cool. Okay, just kind of moving on a little bit in the interest of time. We're doing well. Okay, so I've kind of, we spoke about the solution, we spoke about the tiering. Let's talk about just cloud-based backup and DR, right? This is really interesting. So kind of just to give you an anecdotal story about one of our customers. So Monterey Bay Aquarium, not far from where our kind of office is, the director for Monterey Bay Aquarium, Brian Fulmer, he has a data. So Monterey Bay Aquarium is kind of a nonprofit, right? They kind of work on a pretty shoestring budget, and they were looking for storage. They weren't even kind of thinking about cloud-integrated storage 2.5 years back when we kind of spoke to them. We went and kind of spoke to them. I did the same presentation, what you're kind of seeing, or a flavor of that back then. He liked the story. He loved the story. The thing, and the ROI, of course, that was kind of very appealing to him. But the part which really kind of got his interest and kind of helped him make the decision was DR. So his point to us was, Berzin, I'm no fool. I always knew that I needed DR. I don't have DR. It's not because I don't know what I need. It's because I cannot afford this stuff. More importantly, the Monterey Bay Aquarium data center is actually in a wooden building. So he's like, I know it even more than anyone else that I need DR, right? But he could never afford it. And through the solution, we kind of gave him a way to kind of facilitate DR without kind of duplicating any of his gear or kind of adding additional complexity. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at what I'm kind of talking about out here. So what you see on your left-hand side out there is the StorSimple solution as we've been talking about it for the last 30 minutes, right? StorSimple appliance, few application service, production data running on it, and integrated to the cloud, right? Now, Jay's going to show this to you, But as part of the solution, we've got a built-in way to take backups of this data which resides on the appliance. So we could do it through the web interface or through kind of an MMC interface in a VSS consistent way. You can say, I've got volume X and Y. I want to take a VSS consistent snapshot of these and push it out to the cloud, right? And we call those cloud snapshots. That's what you see out in the cloud out there. Now, that's best practice and highly recommended. 100% of our customers who use our solution do this. So it's not kind of a good to do. It's kind of almost, that's what they bought the solution for. That's what they do. And that helps them eliminate their tapes, right? Tapes, the purpose of a tape is you want an offsite backup. And yeah, you got it in the Azure cloud. Why do you need to kind of have a full kind of boatload of kind of complexity and infrastructure for tape and then kind of iron mountain service and all this complexity? So you can kind of eliminate that. By the way, coincidentally, that was one of the big additional value adds from the StorSimple solution, which Monterey Bay Aquarium realized. So their estimate was they saved 1 man day a week by this solution, because there was one person who had to actually kind of do all this tape and everything once a week, and it would take him a day to kind of finish the full task here. So that's the solution. Now, say disaster strikes, right? That's what you see on your left-hand side is your main data center, and it goes offline. When I say it goes offline, just the storage could go, the power could go, the whole thing could catch fire. Maybe it's a long-term disaster, short-term disaster, whatever. In any of those events, what you could do is go to another location, fire up a StorSimple appliance similar to this, and any model would work. Point it, apply the configuration file, and we have a seamless way of backing up the configuration file and restoring it onto another appliance. So you could do that, and you would be up and running in like tens of minutes and hours, as opposed to days or months or never with traditional just DR. So that's the DR built into the solution. Pretty easy to understand. The VSS consistent snapshot of the data being out in Azure helps facilitate this functionality. So, yeah, question. Thank you.
When you take that snapshot, you call it a cloud snapshot, right? But is it also consistent with the content that's actually stored on the SSD?
Yeah. So here's the way to kind of look at it. So the question was, when I say cloud snapshot, is it also consistent with the data which is resident on the SSDs? And yes, absolutely. So here's the way. I'll explain it differently now, right? Say you have a volume. Let's call it the X drive. That X drive, say you have 20 or just say 10 terabytes of data on the X drive. 10 terabytes of data would be split and tiered across SSD, SAS, and the cloud, right? Let's just say it's kind of 100 gig on the SSD, 1 terabyte on the SAS, and the rest is out. 8.9 terabyte is out in the cloud, right? That's your volume. That's the primary data, and it's tiered out. That's normal primary storage operation, the way I explain it. Now you want to take a cloud-based backup. At that point, what's going to happen is the VSS writer is going to basically take the 100 gig from the SSD, the 1 terabyte from the SAS, right? That data is not in the cloud, and it's going to push it out to the cloud, such that you have a full 10 terabyte contained backup sitting VSS consistently sitting out in Azure Cloud. And these are just raw numbers. Now keep in mind that we deduplicate and compress. So 10 terabytes of data will translate to about 5 terabytes or less of cloud storage in the back end. Yeah? Question?
Make sure I understand. So when you take that snapshot, at that point, there's nothing local because it's all been pushed.
Good question. So the question is, if you take a snapshot, then does it mean that 100 gig from the SSD and 1 terabyte from the SAS then gets pushed out to the cloud? Yes, the data gets pushed out to the cloud, but in that case, we would have somewhat of a double copy, right? We don't want to unnecessarily invalidate that data. That data was hot before you took a cloud snapshot, so it's going to continue being hot. So we basically just push it out, but we kind of keep it around out there. Then if the data changes at the next cloud snapshot, the block will have to get pushed out again. Yeah?
Somewhat related question. What's your behavior? So if you need data that's in the cloud, it's not local, what's your behavior if you do have, you've lost connection because as you said, the cloud.
Yeah, good question. Good question. So the question was, what happens if you need to access data from the cloud and your WAN is kind of suffering connectivity issues? So let me start by saying that the possibility of needing data from the cloud should be kind of less than 5%. Now, in that 5%, the WAN being kind of not the most reliable link, if you have a WAN problem, we will basically return a SCSI IO busy message to the application, and the application will retry. We wait for, do you know the timeout, Jeff? How many? 30. We wait, and then basically if it times out, we'll kind of return an error. It's no different than a regular traditional storage where one of the disks has gone bad, right? You do IO busy, at some point you time out. So we'll time out after that. Okay, so security, meaning I know I kind of covered it already, but this is a big deal, right? A lot of people kind of struggle with this whole security thing, and I'm really kind of happy to see that that's kind of becoming less of an issue as kind of cloud adoption and just kind of the buzz around the cloud is increasing. But trust me, 18 months back, security was kind of like, there would have been like 10 questions from you guys around security. So I kind of still proactively address this stuff. So why StorSimple, and how do we kind of solve the security problem, right? So the first thing to keep in mind, I told you the data is deduplicated and compressed, right? We break it up into these 64K chunks, and then we deduplicate and compress it. Therein, we basically kind of completely garbled up the data, right? At the other end of that pool, you cannot kind of make out what those blocks were, how we kind of broke them up, and how we deduplicated and compressed it. So that's kind of the first level of security, the way I like to explain it, right? Over and above that, we take that data, that garbled data, and we basically AES-256 encrypt it before pushing it out to the cloud. Now that AES-256 encryption private key is only in the control of the customer, which would be you guys. Microsoft doesn't have it, and you don't need to kind of, or you do not store it in Azure or anywhere. So you, as the kind of the owner of that key, is the only one who can really make sense of that data. So if you kind of get subpoenaed, or kind of Microsoft gets subpoenaed for kind of showing up or kind of presenting the data to any kind of government agency, they can kind of they may get the data, but since you have the key, they can't really kind of make much sense of it. And of course, kind of the data which was kind of garbled, encrypted, is the one which is being stored in Azure. There's not a single byte of data or configuration or anything we store in the cloud which is not completely encrypted. And that's pretty important to know. There is no side channel. The only channel to the cloud is fully encrypted. There's nothing. And the transfer to the cloud is over HTTPS. So that's kind of double protected in transit. Yeah. And I kind of like to joke and tell people that after all these kind of security mechanisms, if someone can still break through the data, then they almost deserve it. So just give it to them. Okay, so important point, right? So a lot of people talk about the cloud and how cheap and easy it is to adopt, and the first use case which comes to their mind is backup. Right? I've got this tons of backup data. I'm just going to put it all out in the cloud, and life will be good, right? Life will be good, but that's kind of if you kind of realize so far, I've not mentioned a backup use case, a pure backup use case where the StorSimple appliance is used as a target just to store your BAK files or your tar files, and then kind of pipe them out to Azure. And the reason for that is pretty simple, and it's explained out here pretty nicely. Putting that data and tiering out to the cloud is great, meaning that I think you can make that work with a good fat enough WAN pipe and kind of the correct schedules, you could make that work. The problem is doing a restore. So when disaster strikes and you have to do a restore, keep in mind that you have to kind of pull down all that data over a thin WAN pipe, and that's going to kind of break the solution. And that's the number one reason, and kind of the main reason, we do not recommend the StorSimple solution as a backup target, as a storage for backup targets. This is just 50 terabytes of data. This is kind of the plot for 50 terabytes of data, how long it would have taken over a 50 megabits WAN pipe. So the red line is, of course, if you were to just kind of put all the data and kind of tear it out to the cloud. The white line is what the RTO is with tape. And you see the green line, which is StorSimple, which is kind of much lower. And the reason that is much lower is because when you kind of take a file share, not a backup target, you take a file share, and that example which I gave you guys, 10 terabytes of data, you tear it out to the cloud. In the event of a disaster, we have built-in logic to only drain down the metadata corresponding to that 10 terabytes. So the way it works is we drain down the metadata, we surface the volume, and then you guys as customers and users, you start accessing the files you want from that volume. Right? We call it thin restore because we are not waiting for all 10 terabytes of your BAK file or your tar file to be drained down, which would possibly take 10 days, and for you to crack open the file at that point. That doesn't work, right? And that's why we very intentionally kind of shy away from that, that particular use case. Okay, as far as models, there was kind of a question just before the session. We've got 4 models, a 5020, 7020, and a 5520, and then which is kind of this form factor. You see, it's a 2U rack mountable unit, and then we have a 7520, which is a 4U. Think of it as 2 of these kind of stacked one above the other, and they are feature compatible. So all the features we've spoken about are available across all models. So we don't kind of nickel and dime you guys on the features. The only difference is the amount of capacity, local and in the cloud, which can be kind of stored through this appliance here. So with that, we're kind of going to switch to the much promised demo, and we'll. One second. Jazz going to take away.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Perfect. So now we can stop updating Facebooks and Twitters. Probably this is the exciting part where you actually get to see the whole integration piece where what Burzin's been talking about, right? And the message here in the demo is simplicity, right? I was the dumbest and laziest guy in the company, and they said, if Jai can do this in 10 minutes, I think anybody should be able to do it, right? So the idea here is 3-step process to bring cloud to your data center, near to your applications, near to your users. And what are those 3 steps? Through a serial console, you would go and give it a management IP address, and after which you use any web browser to manage the backups, your disaster recovery, or your day-to-day configuration changes, if any, that you need to make on the storage array. The first step is to go ahead and configure the networking parameters, right? As you can see on the solution, there are 4 NICs, and you get to decide on which VLAN they should be, which interface goes towards the Azure cloud, which interface goes towards my application, and decide on the routing protocols around that, right? So you decide on, do I want to use the same NIC as my iSCSI and outbound cloud traffic, or go separate it out? Once you decide that, the next is DNS, right? As you guys fully understood now that all the traffic leaving the solution going towards Azure is all HTTPS, hence DNS server to do the name resolution, and finally NTP server to when you're trying to mount those cloud snapshots or do disaster recovery in a different location, just to ensure you're in time sync with the Azure data center at the back end. So pretty simple, straightforward networking around that. Then the second step, is going and figuring out on security credentials. So we do support all forms of iSCSI authentication mechanism, right? CHAP on the initiator side, CHAP on the target side, and also volume access control records. This is just identify and locking a particular volume to a different application server, right? I want to present a volume to my ESX servers, or I want to present a volume to my file servers. This is just ensuring you have access control records based on the iSCSI IQN that is available on the host side. So the second key step is now, how does the StorSimple solution know in which bucket, in which storage blob bucket do I go and start tiering my data or start writing my cloud snapshot data at the back end? So pretty straightforward integration. I'm sure you guys have gone to Azure sessions or at least gone to the portal and created a storage account, if any. All you go and do there is create your storage account, which gives you what we call is the access key and secret key. You go to windows.azure.com, cut and paste those keys out here, and then go hit verify. What this ensures is three things: that you have cut and pasted the key well, your networking is in place. Basically, the port 443 is open, so from the StorSimple solution, we can reach the Azure data center, and the NTP server is in time sync, after which we let you go ahead and save the cloud credentials. So this is where now you have established a connection from your data center to the Azure data center of your choice. You can have multiple storage accounts within a single solution. So you can say one storage account goes to the Dublin data center, one goes to the New York data center. You can have around 64 of these within a single solution. Depending on the use case, depending on the application or where the users reside, you can diversify. Once that is done, you go ahead and define a configuration. The configuration is essentially where you go and enter your encryption key that Burzin's been talking about, right? This is my configuration account, and leverage this encryption key. You could use your key management system, generate an encryption key and punch it in here, or you could just use a 32-bit passphrase and that will be leveraged for encrypting any data in transit or any data addressed in Azure. So now the key step is how do I go and map a volume to that particular cloud account? So here I go create a volume, and I'm going to just say a demo volume. There are various types of volumes available, right? Think about this as defining a priority on what data is critical, and this is where it goes back to the block ranking or that linear tier where we go and add our StorSimple metadata to every block, right? Think about virtual machine OS images or transaction logs. Those are going to be eventually committed to the database, or I'm going to power on, power off virtual machines quite often. So we try to give it more a preferential treatment to hold it on the hardware longer enough than any file share volume or a SharePoint blob store volume where the data can now go to Azure. That volume, the data from that volume will go to Azure before any of these local preferential volumes will be touched. It's not a guaranteed local only, it's more a preferential treatment where we'll try to hold it much longer than the normal volume. So let's say a file share volume. And now with the whole thin provisioning as part of a feature set that is provided with the solution, I could just go and enable a 100 terabyte volume. Here, leave this daily cloud snapshot checkbox on, which will create a policy saying any data within this appliance, every night go and back it up into Azure. So now I don't have to worry about backup, disaster recovery. As and when I'm creating volumes, the task of backup and DR is already implemented along with that. And then I could go ahead and map a security policy saying only this demo server of mine has visibility into that. So with 3 easy steps, I have created a 100 terabyte volume, and now leveraging Microsoft iSCSI Initiator, it could be VMware iSCSI Initiator, we support both Windows or VMware. If I go to my disk manager now, I should be able to see that 100 terabyte volume available. So this is the key point where Burzen was saying from a user application standpoint, we want no disruption. There should be no change on how I'm accessing my data, where the data resides. I want to get to a file, I'll get to the file. It might be milliseconds later, or I could get it at the SSD speed, depending on how often I'm accessing a particular data set or a particular file. So in the interest of time, since Burzen loves talking, I'm going to use the 5 gig volume where I have already created, it's the same volume. If I go back to my web UI, I've created a 5 gig volume. So I can show you moving data into Azure and pull it back down, which I have gone and mapped to what I call is the E drive here. And I have copied certain files into that, right? E drive. As users can, again, like read, write, delete data, everything is transparent for us from a storage standpoint, or it's fully transparent. This is what is our so-called the whole backup integration piece, backup, restore, and DR piece, where we were talking about the whole VSS integration, right? We have our own VSS hardware providers. So if you're having to take application consistent snapshot, I would use this MMC plugin. If it was a non-Windows application, I could perform the same task through the web UI of doing data protection, creating volume groups, and policies of taking snapshots or cloud snapshots to go and back up that data set. So how easy it is to configure these backup policies or the cloud snapshots? Through some iSCSI APIs, we go and discover those volumes that I have created and mapped it as E drive. The first step is to create what we call as the volume group. The reason for volume group is I could have 10 file shares, I want to apply a single policy to it, or it could be a database world where I need to ensure VSS knows which volumes to quiz and take application consistent snapshots, hence volume group. Yeah. Question? Same time, yeah, snap across. So once my volume group is created, in this example, it's mapped to the E drive, I could take two kinds of backup. I know there were a lot of questions around snapshot and cloud snapshot piece, right? The message I have given to the customers is you are going to worry or go to the cloud snapshot in two cases only. One, when there is a true disaster that happens, or secondly, when your local snapshot retention has expired and now the data is available only in the cloud snapshot piece. You can define retention durations of I want to store so many local snapshots, which is residing on the hardware, which is just pointers to where the blocks is residing. And then the cloud snapshot piece is where you have the truly independent backup now residing into Azure. So the first line of defense where you want to do a file level restore or some VMDK level restore, you would go to the local snapshot in that case. So here I'm going to execute a local snapshot, and then I'm going to issue a cloud snapshot piece. We do have, just like any traditional storage vendor would provide, a mechanism to schedule your dailies, weeklies, monthlies, and how long you want to retain those backups. We do have that available down to a granular 15-minute interval if you decide to schedule policies around that. Just the thing to note, we haven't spoken much about the cloud clone. I just wanted to mention that cloud clone is like a cloud snapshot, just it's a different target destination. So cloud snapshot could go to one data center and cloud clone could go to the other data center. In our world, only 2 customers have enabled it because of compliance reasons, and they need to show that they have backups in a truly independent data center. Most of the customers, because Azure does a 3-way geo-replication, they have not gone and enabled the cloud clone because it is definitely going to cost you double. It's like doing your disk-based backup and paying your tape vendors the same double the money for the same amount of data set. So that's the reason they have not gone and enabled. With that, I could go to my E drive, for example, now, and let's say a user goes and deletes certain set of files. So now the data is gone, the help desk ticket comes in that I need to go back and restore certain data set from my backup. They could go back to local snapshot and click on restore. We know it was mapped to the E drive, and this will do what I call as the volume level restore. So if you just want to overwrite the entire data set, you have that capability. Or I could go to E drive and say clone, and I'm going to say restore from a snapshot and map it to a different drive letter. So I'm going to say map from snapshot to J drive. Somebody's happy. Or you could do restore. Same workflow applies for a cloud snapshot also. I could do a volume level restore, or I could go to that cloud clone and say restore and create a truly independent volume. So this is the example where Burzin was highlighting in cases where you could use this workflow for restoring your data set, or it could be for purposes where a legal lawsuit comes in and your legal department says, I need the entire data set from 3 months ago or 6 months ago. I could clone a volume. So now if I go back to my web UI, I am able to see those two new sort of cloned volumes available. I could change the access control record for those two volumes. Right now it is mapped to the same demo server. I could change the access control record, create a truly independent pod for them, and let the lawyers take whatever data they need to. Once I'm done, I could just dismount it, right? So that's how easy you could, or you're testing some upgrade or binary upgrade that you need to do for your development environments. You can quickly clone your data set and test the upgrades on that. So now restore standpoint, I could go to my J drive, K drive, my metadata information from Cloud Snapshot is available, and then once I copy paste, I will really hydrate the data from cloud back into the local storage. So just doing Control C. So you can see how simplicity is the message, right? From the demo is, and that's where the Monterey example is really classic, where you can truly see why the customers are happy and they're saving man hours and also the ROI because of the cheapest Azure cloud storage available at the backend. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on doing disaster recovery. This is where I really get nervous. So this is my primary appliance, right? I save the identity of this appliance, which is an encrypted file, right? This would be residing on your management server. This does not get, with a cloud snapshot, this file does not get pushed into Azure. That is how we guarantee that you are in control of your encryption key, your cloud accounts, your access patterns, all that is residing within your data center. So I could go and now save the XML file, save as, on the desktop, and it's a date and timestamp. So this was my primary appliance. Remember the animation Burzin was showing, so it was .35. I'm going to close that, so that way, and this is my DR appliance, for example. So I could go to my DR appliance, and one thing Burzin sort of didn't mention is, you could have active appliance, each one running their independent file share in different locations, but they could act as a DR whenever a need arises. Or you're just doing geo collaboration where you want some data to be moved from one appliance to the other appliance. You can have two active appliances and do exactly what I'm still showing and get hold of the data in the other data center. On my DR appliance, I would come, import that same configuration file. So I'm going to browse to my desktop and 5th June and load the configuration. Here we give you the option of selecting. You could have, like I said, you could have multiple cloud credentials, multiple cloud snapshots. We let you decide on what you truly want to go and import, right? You could have everything or nothing for that matter. And all I'm going to worry about is the cloud configuration piece. So here, I am going to say I want my cloud credentials and my cloud configuration. That's all I want to go ahead and import here. What this gives me visibility is I know the login and password to my cloud bucket, which is fully encrypted, and what is the encryption key around that. Once I have that, I could go to the cloud credentials section, and now you can see that I have imported, and all I'm going to do is now restore the backup registry. When we are restoring the backup registry, it lets us, it basically gathers all the information on number of cloud snapshots available tied to this cloud account, right? That's all we go and fetch, and then you can mount any of those cloud snapshots and restore your data back from there on. So this way you can see DR is, you can truly test DR on a 3-month or a 6-month cycle and get the opportunity saying if a disaster truly occurs, I do have the capability to verify my data, ensure data is not corrupted or files are not lost, and verify and delete these credentials after that. Yeah. And once that is done, I want, let me just quickly check. Just show you that it is truly coming from Azure. So if I change my reporting scale down to the cloud bytes, I should see some reads happening because it is just fetching the metadata information from the cloud snapshot piece. So here you can see the reads coming directly from Azure down to the appliance and pulling that data set. With that, if I go under my data protection and backups, I will be able to see those cloud snapshots and do a restore from there on. So I'm going to spend 3 minutes on a few slides and hand it over back to Burzin. So here you can see my TechEd volume group and my snapshots that I took right now, same date and time stamp, and I can now do DR quickly after that point. So the message here was simplicity, right? In 5 minutes, I can have cloud presented back to your data center and without any disruption and without any user changes on that front. We could keep talking about creating marketing slides, sales slides, right, and say how good the solution is, right? But there are analysts who have done their research. They've gone out, spoken to the customer base. They have spoken to enterprise accounts where they've said, if there was a solution like this available, would you go buy for it? Or do you see a need for that, right? And they independently, Taneja and ESG both have said StorSimple is the innovator and leader in this category for this whole cloud integrated storage or the hybrid storage market that we are trying to capture. We are certified. This just got updated on Windows Server 2012 and VMware. So we are the only certified hybrid storage vendor for VMware and Microsoft and VMware use cases. And we've won tons of awards. So this is where we've sort of gone ahead and competed with traditional storage vendors and still come out as winners around that. A case study, right, is this for 2 terabyte data set, 20 terabyte data set, or what is the scale that this can scale into, right? So we have a semiconductor customer whose daily monthly growth was around 1.8 terabytes a month across multiple sites. And they just did not want to keep growing their infrastructure. They were tired of managing their backups, and their RTO, RP objectives were not getting met because of the scale the data was growing at. They went and purchased 3 of the largest units, where 2 are acting as primary and third one acting as a DR unit, mounting the cloud snapshots and having access to all the data available into Azure around that. The sales cycle was pretty, from day one, we have the capability of doing a proof of concept. They did a end-to-end process was just 5 weeks, where they saw the value. You saw the demo. It's easy to set up. They started pumping data, started taking cloud snapshots, and were able to see that the performance was at par for the working set data, and the availability was fitting their RTO, RPO objectives around that. ROI, it gets really interesting in terms of ROI, is the Azure being the cheapest storage tier out there, right? When you compare the entire solution with StorSimple and Azure, right, you're looking at backup software costs, your tape costs, your infrastructure costs, versus just StorSimple and Azure costs. The ROI, which we have done for 200 plus customers now, that's where the 60 to 80% savings is where a baseline number that we guarantee when you compare a solution to a solution, rather than just storage cost per gig to a storage cost per gig around that. Yeah. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Borsin to talk about some offers and close it out.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. Great demo. Cool, folks. Hopefully that demo brought it all together for you guys. So far we've kind of been talking about this appliance which you see in front of you and the StorSimple, the Azure cloud. And from a customer perspective, from your perspective, or maybe kind of your customers, these are kind of two separate purchases, so to speak, right? And a lot of people who had their heads around traditional storage, which is just really one purchase, kind of couldn't really adapt to this and this OpEx model, right? This whole Azure thing, cloud pay-as-you-grow is great until you kind of are burdened with the problem of having to predict what you are going to use and have to budget for it and OpEx. So basically what we've done is, as part of for HCS, we have this packaged offer through which we offer for $50,000, we'll kind of offer you 50 terabytes of storage, and there's another offer which for $100,000, we give you 100 terabytes of effective host site storage, right? Just a packaged offer. When you kind of sign up for that, you get the 100K, 50K of Azure or 100K of Azure, and the StorSimple appliance at no cost, right? So that 2 POs and 2 purchases now kind of become one simple purchase through this offer. We've kind of kept it a little bit flexible, so if you want to upgrade the appliance to kind of a higher model or you want platinum support, you could kind of get that as an add-on as well. And last slide of the session. So all good stuff, I kind of understand it, seems to make sense, but how do I know I need it, right? 5 kind of simple questions you can ask yourself. Do you have a problem with just this explosive storage growth and the manageability around it? And do you want to kind of just simplify that complexity and reduce the cost? If yes, then absolutely. A good solution for you guys. Are you kind of burdened with just tapes and managing tapes and kind of the Monterey aquarium example I kind of gave you? You want to eliminate tapes and want to kind of go with hybrid cloud storage? Yes, a good solution for you. And of course, as we kind of spoke about that VM case, if you're kind of burdened with the VM, just that bloat and growth problem, and you want to kind of manage it more seamlessly, great solution for you, right? So just kind of easy ways to kind of just think about it, think about kind of and get your kind of heads around when to adapt the solution. And as I said, we've got kind of more than 250 customers now worldwide, all positive, great stories. We've got kind of 85 plus references and kind of great success stories out there. So with that, just some related contact, where to go for additional information, storsimple.com or storsimple.com. We'll be kind of at the Expo floor this later part of this afternoon, or you can kind of drop us email, burzenp@microsoft.com or jaydesai@microsoft.com. Track resources, in case you guys are kind of interested. Additional resources, you may have seen these slides before. I'm sorry if you have. Enter to win, and then I'll stop here in case you want to kind of this thing. So I encourage you to kind of fill out the surveys, and thank you for your time. Thanks for coming. If there are any questions, we can take them right now. We've got 5 minutes left out here. Yep, go ahead. Jay, come up.
Did you say the encryption setting, if that's an appliance, on or off for Azure?
It's per cloud account setting. So per cloud
There's one setting for the whole appliance, right?
No. Individual cloud credential can have its own encryption key.
Yeah.
So where I cut and pasted the Azure keys,
Okay.
so per storage account in Azure, you could have an encryption key mapped to it.
You can have lots of different storage.
Yes.
Yes.
64
Yeah.
mapped to it.
Yeah.
You said once you turn it on, you can't turn it off, but you can turn it on when you've already got encrypted data there, or can
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
It should be always on, meaning there's no good reason why you should be turning it on. Yeah. We do support some other clouds. If there's kind of a local cloud and you're like, oh, this is fully secured, it's all in my building, then maybe you can turn it off.
Yeah. Question? No. So that's where the whole volume priority, the preferential treatment comes in, where we have applied our own logic based on the access pattern and the block ranking. Plus, depending on the volume type you select, we go and make some decisions based on the type of volumes you select, that we'll try to hold it more local rather than guaranteed pin it on the local hardware.
I saw that little checkbox that says, daily snapshot. Can the RPM be lowered? Can you go more granular?
Yeah. So that is just a default policy for a use case where some application guy comes, hey, I need 4 terabytes of storage. The storage admin goes and configures it, but he forgets to apply the backup policy. That checkbox is mainly, okay, for now, just go and create a default policy, but you can go edit it and bring it down to a 15-minute or a 1-hour granularity. Yeah.
New to the cloud snapshots, are they actually full backups to the cloud, or are some new data
Incremental.
Yeah, incremental block level changes after dedupe and compression.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. At the surface, when Jay was doing the restore, you saw all those backups he had taken. The first one obviously was the full one, right? Everything had to be pushed out, but then it was all incremental. But from a user's perspective, from your perspective, everything seems like a full. What's that?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the point being that it's not like a typical incremental, like a SQL Server, where you would go and first restore your full backup and then you'd overlay the incrementals. We don't do that. It's always just kind of go to one point and just restore it, and under the covers, we'll kind of unroll all the blocks.
Yeah,
exactly.
the referencing of blocks is what we do. Yeah?
Yeah.
So I noticed under cloud providers it was a drop down. So you had one as Azure, and do you support other providers?
Yeah, we do.
We do. Yeah.
Cool.
I was going to ask you that in private.
Hey, no private. It's all public information. It's fine, man. Yeah. Okay, folks. Thanks a lot for coming. And stop by, kind of meet us if you want, kind of to see the appliance. You're kind of free to step up and do that. We'll be waiting outside as well if you have additional questions. Any private questions we can take outside. Okay. Yeah. You got to check.